This is the YOB ConvoCast, one-on-one conversations with your other brother's authors, community members, supporters, and friends.
When I'm with you, I feel like I'm already home. When I'm with you, I'm right where I belong. I'm already home.
What's up, friends, and welcome back to the YOB ConvoCast conversations with brothers near and far, to and fro, all over this world. What's up? My name's Tom. I'm the editor, co-founder of YOB, and we're a community navigating faith, homosexuality, and masculinity, and we are rapidly winding down this summer series. It may not feel like summer anymore where you are, depending on where you live in this world. I'm very biased to the Northern Hemisphere, I'm realizing. I'm completely antagonistic to the Southern Hemisphere, who are deep in the throes of winter right now. Wow. Hope you guys are surviving. We are finishing up this series called At Home as we examine how our living situations and how our life stages intersect with our journeys of faith, sexuality, and masculinity. And so I knew at some point in this series, I would talk to somebody like me, somebody who lives all by himself. And I found this person. I first met him, and everyone on our listening audience first met him several months ago when he debuted on this podcast. He did such a great job. He has a great voice. He's also got a very distinct accent in addition to just the tone of his voice. And I appreciate the multicultural perspective he gives our community as another white man, but a white man in another country. It's my other brother and yours, Simon. What's up, Simon?
Hello, hi, good to be here. I realized in my first episode, I didn't use my favorite American versus British word thing that is weird, which always sort of blows people's minds. Hopefully it will blow your mind. Which part of your face do you frown with?
Your mouth? Your lips? What are you talking about?
Yeah. In America, you frown with your mouth. In England, you frown with your eyebrows. It's like a furrowed brow is a frown. Isn't that crazy?
What? I have never heard that. Is that true?
So we don't have, yeah, it's true. And for years, I was like, why are they saying turn that frown upside down? Because you're just meant to look like surprised with your eyebrows. But turns out, then I learned that Americans are referring to the mouth when they say frown. I couldn't believe it.
That is fascinating. Wow. Yeah. I've heard of the phrase furrowed brow, but I've never associated that with a frown. Yeah. That is so interesting to me. Wow. This is why we have you on the show, Simon. No other reason, just to give us some new knowledge about how words work on the other side of the ocean. Thank you for that.
The shortest episode yet. It's been good to be here. Thanks.
I'm glad you're back. I knew I wanted to have you back. We had a delightful conversation last time, and we can't waste any time because we've already got a jam-packed episode as it is, talking about living alone. That's kind of the focus on this episode because you and I both live alone separately on opposite sides of the Atlantic Ocean. But yes, we live alone. So we're going to talk about that today. But I feel like while I have you, we definitely need to discuss a little European retreat that was teased many episodes ago. I would say you're fresh off of it, but it's been a few weeks now, I guess, or maybe you're not fresh off of it. But fairly recently, you and a bunch of other people from our community and outsiders who have now become insiders to our community went on this little retreat to Scotland. I don't know anything. I know very little, rather, I will say, about this weekend. I've been saving it. I've been saving my suspense for this episode. I wanted to hear it straight from you, and our listeners will get to hear it too. About how this retreat went. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on it because you had said something on our last episode about you haven't spent much time with other men, or you don't have much of a desire to connect with other men, or something along those lines. You can correct me where I'm wrong. But so that I'm just naturally very curious on how your time was this weekend, this extended weekend with a bunch of men from our community. What was that like?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's the first time that I've been away with exclusively men, unless you count me just going away with my brother. But, with a bigger group of men. And there were 7 of us. We, when it was being organized, the debate was, do we go to Scotland or do we go to the Mediterranean? And the Mediterranean was well, 40 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but very hot.
That's hot.
And
It's like 100 plus.
So I was thrilled that we instead went to, chilly Scotland, and it was amazing. So yeah, I think it's probably less structured maybe than the American retreat. There was definitely some structure, but there was also more just time for chilling out or sitting around or not quite knowing what was going to happen in the next couple of hours. And it was amazing. I think the first evening we'd all flown or driven from different places, and we were all a little bit nervous, particularly those of us who hadn't been on any sort of retreat before, and be like, will we get on? There are 7 of us, which is, it's not a tiny number, but it's also small enough that you'll really tell if one person is an outlier. And by the next day, we were like, we are bonded for life. We all love each other. So it was really special. Yeah. I think the most, I should just say, I'm not going to say anyone's names in case anyone's listening and is worried I'm going to out them. But there was the thing that I found most special was that there is a much younger guy there who was 21, who is also an identical twin. So we were able to have that sort of very niche conversation of what it's like to, be side B and have identical twin and not be sure whether or not they're gay too, and be worried about telling them in case they were. And that's, we felt like a minority within a minority within a minority. So that I found that we didn't have masses of conversation about that, but I found it really special that we now have that connection and can talk about those things, because that's such a specific side B experience. But found someone else in that boat.
That is so cool. Yeah. A niche or a niche experience, as you pointed out on our last time together.
Yes,
talking.
Indeed. Yeah.
So I saw some pictures, because some pictures were posted on our Discord channel, and I just was like, the vibe, the Scottish Highlands vibe is like, I'm all there for that. Like, I just feel like that fits Yob so well. I'm sure seeing pictures of islands and ocean or Mediterranean sea vibes, I'm sure that would have been beautiful too. But like the Scottish, that Scottish vibe that you guys had, I was like, man, that is so Yob. It is just perfect. So that just makes me happy to hear, because I remember you mentioning that you've never gone on a trip like that with other men. And so did you have anxiety at the beginning? Any kind of anxiety, or did you just feel generally good about it at the beginning? What was your thoughts going into that weekend?
I did have some anxiety, not really from the sort of men point of view, I think, but more from just like, what if these people don't like me? And then there's only 7 of us, and it's really obvious that I find the pariah.
There's less room to hide versus a 50-person retreat, because we get about 50 for our retreats here in America. So that is, less room to hide over there.
Yeah, and I also, the part of, I knew a couple of people in the group were quite anxious as well. I wanted them to be having a good time. And so, I had confidence it would be good. I think the thing that really made it, that fast track from being strangers to being brothers, I guess, is you had that time where everyone had half an hour to share their testimony and to do a little Q&A afterwards, and we spread that throughout the whole weekend. So it was 2 people a session, and there is just you can't stay just acquaintances when you've really delved into the deepest parts of someone's heart, can you? It's just it's a real fast track to deep friendship.
Yeah, that's so great. Was there any other structured part? Because I was trying to think there. I think there were 2 guys there, because you guys roped an American into the mix. So shout out to the American guy. But there are 2 guys at this retreat who have been involved in YOB leadership through the years and have come to our American retreats. And so I was curious about, from that standpoint, of anything that was organized or anything that was structured from the weekend that stood out to you. Because I know most of it, like you said, was just free for all, downtime, hanging out together, which is really cool. But did anything from the structured side of it stick out with you?
I did really appreciate, I don't know what the name of it is, but the sort of thing where we got in a circle and they read out different things from a list, like, have you experienced XYZ and or XYZ? And you would walk into the middle, or if you did. And they did say that it would start gentle and get worse, not worse, deeper.
Yes.
Or to my mind, worse. And when it started with like, are you attracted to men? I was like, of course we all are, but I was expecting it to start with like, do you like the color blue or something? We like, if that's the shallow end, where are we going to get to? And that, I found that really a profound experience, actually, even though there were no like follow-up questions, and it wasn't going really deep into how people were feeling, but just that vulnerability without having to feel like, oh gosh, I'm going to have to explain myself was really special. And yeah, some things you'd stand on the outside and think, oh gosh, I'm, grateful that I've not struggled with that. And some things you'd walk into the middle and be like, here are my two or three brothers who know what that's like.
Mm.
And we did that actually in a wood near a sports lake because we were out and had to keep pausing if people were walking their dogs by. We just move on to like normal men's conversation. And then,
Gotcha. It's probably wise. Yeah. Yeah, we did that exercise once at a camp where there were like camp staff walking around. I remember one year where that was maybe a little awkward of like wondering what the passersby might be thinking, but pretty much consistently year after year, that's my one of my favorite, if not my favorite part of the retreat, is just like seeing the vulnerability on display. And it's such an equalizer for all of us to start to, it's very abrupt and it's very awkward and it's very uncomfortable, but it's also very like we're all still there. We're still alive. We're still breathing. We're still like, nobody's like passing out. Like we're all there and we're all be able to support each other through these confessions and through these times where we can just all just be real with each other. Like this is a retreat where we're supposed to be real. And it's like, I don't want to go on a men's retreat where we're not going to be authentic and we're not going to be real with each other. And I love that was able to be manifested in your guys' retreat too. So that's encouraging. I'm really happy to hear about that.
Somebody did briefly pass out. Actually, funny you should say, but we moved on. It was all fine.
Shout out to that person. No story, no context needed. Yeah, that's amazing. We always have a first aid. I don't know if y'all have a first aid kit. We have a first aid kit present at all of our retreats. So just in case. We usually have at least one or two registered nurses or something. So there's someone CPR certified. Like we try to be as prepared for anything as possible. But I'm so happy to hear that. And it's just like really cool to think that could be the first of many. Like who knows? Like maybe you guys always have those European retreats. Maybe year after year you're able to like bring in more American people to jump over. I mean, I personally would love to be included and go to one of those things. Like, I think that would be
always welcome.
I would love that.
I did ask the American at the end what the main difference he'd found between our retreat and the American retreat. And I didn't know what I expected, but not what he said, which was basically like, you guys don't like touching each other as much. Okay, yeah, I guess that is a cultural.
Wow,
difference.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, we're generally, because I don't want to speak for everybody, we are generally a very touchy-feely, huggy-oriented community over here in this country, but that's not everybody. So maybe to the touch averse or the touch nonchalant, maybe you could explore the European retreat. Maybe that's more your jam if they're not as into
we
that. We
shake hands at the beginning of the week and then,
a nice firm handshake upon goodbye. And there you go.
Exactly.
I love that. What a great observation, contrast between the two retreats. Yeah. That's hilarious. Well, that was just a small taste of it. We'll see. You guys know I like to put my little extra bonus content at the end of these ConvoCasts. So there may or may not be a little audio clip from that, from that retreat that was sent to me by Daniel. So like, who knows? Maybe that'll make its way into the episode later. You guys will just have to stay tuned and see a little audio snippet from the adventure. So
what a tease.
What a tease. Yeah. It's nothing crazy, but it is something. So maybe some people will enjoy that. Well, let's talk about this series, Simon, at home, because I've been waiting. I've been biding my time until there's something that applies to me. Because I've been living alone for the last 6 years now, I believe, a little over 6 years now, consecutively. And so I've never had that long of a stretch of living alone in my whole life. And so I'm curious, because I've already spoiled your living situation. Like, how long have you been living alone?
I'm just a little bit ahead of you. It's been 7 years. 7
years. Okay. So what were some of your living situations prior to that?
Sure. Well, we can maybe go back to childhood later, but after I left home, I went to university. I lived in university halls. And then for 10 years after university, I lived in various different share houses. There were always 4 of us in a house, and for most of them I was the only man. So I don't think there's been other people on the series who've lived predominantly with women, but I mostly lived with straight women. And then not necessarily because I was seeking to avoid living with men. It's just my friends were women, and the people that offered me rooms were women. There was one house actually with my best friend and a couple other women where someone in church did caution her that she shouldn't live with a man, but nobody spoke to me about it. So we went ahead. Um, and then, yeah, so I did that for 10 years, and I was finding that I was getting older, but my housemates were always 24. It just different 24-year-olds would move in as the latest crop got married. And when I could afford it, which was sort of the main factor holding me back, I moved half an hour outside the city to a little village, and that's where I still live.
Okay, nice. Yeah, so let's talk about the women thing, because when I was trying to lay out this series and trying to get as many configurations of humans cohabitating with each other, like I knew at some point I would talk to at least one or two married guys, but like in the back of my mind, I was wondering, I wonder if there's anybody in our community that's just lived with women, but not in a marriage context. Like they're just friends, they're just roommates. And so I'm curious, that's not going to be the focus of this conversation, but I'm curious what stands out to you. Like what was the best part of living with women, or what was the most difficult part, or if there's something that stands out as challenging about that setup? Because I am curious what that is like to live with women that you're not married to or attracted to or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the best part was just that I found them easiest to get on with, and that I didn't have to worry that I'd walk into the living room and somebody be watching soccer, because that would be that'd be my nightmare. And I know some women do like watching sport, but
don't you call it football over there?
I did. I was Americanizing.
Oh, you were
it.
translating it. Oh, please don't translate for us. Use your dialect. Use your words. Yeah, but I appreciate the gesture.
Yeah, some people do call it soccer here. I think if you like football, then people get very angry about calling it soccer, and which is why I often call it soccer to enrage people who like it. I lived with a few men at different times, and I just found women better communicators to live with, more likely to share my interests. The fact that I would never be attracted to them was a bonus. I think it would be quite hard to live with somebody who I fancied. So that was always off the table. Were there any downsides? Oh, I mean, it's a stereotype, but longer in the bathroom, I guess. They're washing all their long hair, so to get a queue for the bathroom.
Were you out? Were you always out to these women, so they just knew definitively up front that there's nothing romantic or sexual happening here, or not so much?
No, not really. So my best friend, yes. So when she had the guy saying, "Are you sure you should live with him?" she was confident that nothing would happen. But I'm trying to think through all the different women I lived with. I think she might have been maybe the only person I was out to out of all those women. So yeah, thankfully there were never any misunderstandings along those lines. At least none that were vocalized. So I'm assuming we got away with it.
Yeah, I don't know what the culture is or what the climate is as far as Christianity in the UK versus Christianity in America, because I just know in a lot of circles, not every circle, but in a lot of circles in America, like if a Christian man and a Christian woman were to live together, it would probably be frowned upon by at least one or two people, probably more, as far as like the appearance of evil, or the appearance of impropriety, the appearance of like sex before marriage, or this illegal cohabitation that should be avoided. And so that's something I'm curious about within our culture in particular. Like if there's no attraction there, like suddenly it doesn't feel as duplicitous or as sneaky or as any kind of negative connotation there if there's not the potential for something romantic or sexual happening. So it's an interesting. Do you have any insight on that as far as the perception? Did you ever have to worry about that?
Yeah, it's what put me off moving in with just one woman, I guess, because I would, my best friend, I'd have quite happily lived with just her, but I thought that might be, cause too many rumors or cause people to be upset about that in the church, or I guess she might suffer from reputationally more than I would. But there didn't seem really to be the same worry if it was a group. Like there were lots of us there. There was one guy once, a different guy, who said to me that I should probably try and live with men from church. At that point, he lived in a house of 5 guys our age from church, and there were basically only 6 of us. So I was like, well, you've all moved in together. I've got to live somewhere, and all the men have moved in together. So I'm gonna risk it.
Yeah.
They all managed not to fall in love with me, as far as I can tell.
That's
So,
good. Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
yeah.
So talk to me then about living alone. What was the deciding factor? Was it strictly like once you could afford it, you were just ready to have your own space and your own way of doing things? Or was there, what was like the transition from sharing spaces with people or predominantly with women to going to living alone?
My penultimate share house I lived in was a really horrible house. I didn't particularly like the people I was with or the location I was. And then I was like, I really want to live on my own. And then I moved into my final share house and I loved the people. I loved the place. It was a nice house. And I thought, I still want to live on my own. So I was realizing it's not just that this living situation isn't working for me because, some of those people are still really dear friends of mine. But I think I just realized I just don't want other people in my home anymore. And I wanted to live in the countryside. I knew that none of my friends would probably want to do that. I wanted to get a cat. I couldn't do that in a renting house. So I needed to buy somewhere to do that. And I wanted to have just space. I mean, I've got thousands of books in here. So I wanted space to have all my books for me. So in some ways, it was sort of just a practical decision of how do I get a cat? How do I get all my things here? How do I move to the countryside? And then the other hand, I was just like, well, I moved here when I was 31. I'd almost bought somewhere else just before my 30th birthday and it fell through at the last minute. And I thought 30 feels like a time that I should be making some sort of change. The thing that held me back a bit was thinking I'm probably never going to live with another person. And it felt like quite a big step to think once I do this, whenever I eventually leave the share house life, it's probably going to be another 40, 50 years that I'm living on my own. I know you've had people on the series who've lived alone for a bit and then gone on to other things. But I thought then, and I think I was right, that once I started doing it, I wouldn't be able to go back to sharing with other people. And now the idea of sharing with other people, I'm just too selfish now. Like I don't want other people touching my things, being in my way. So yeah, it felt like a big move, but at the same time, I was so ready for it and really excited to do it.
Yeah, I can resonate with that a little bit. Maybe to a slightly lesser extent, because I think there is part of me that if I close my eyes and I just think about my life between now and 50 years from now, like it's hard for me to imagine just living alone for this entire stretch. Maybe that's way easier for you to imagine. It sounds like that's more feasible for you, but, and I could be like, I don't know, I could be living alone for the next 50 years, but there's part of me that's like, I think I want at some point to share space again, but have very clear boundaries and very clear distinctions about where's my space and where's the shared space, and just making it maybe more clear than any other situation that I've been a part of in the past. So I'm open to, like most things in my life, I feel like I'm open to a lot, but it is like, there are a lot of perks to living alone, which I'll share my own things here soon. Real quick though, because you mentioned your cat, we were chatting before this call about your cat, which is in a currently unique state. Do you want to share with our listeners the state of your cat right now?
My cat is radioactive.
Like for real, like actually.
literally radioactive. So yeah, he's got hyperthyroidism, and what a treatment for that is to be injected with radioactive iodine. When the vet was going through the treatment options, she was like, you could do pills, you could do a diet, you could inject him with radioactivity. I was not ready for that option.
Wow.
But apparently it's like the gold standard option. So he's currently not in the flat because he's too radioactive to be around humans, but he's hopefully coming home soon. It is very weird not having him here, but yeah, it feels surreal. I don't know anything about science at all. So I can't get, it sounds so fake. It sounds like science fiction, but apparently is a legitimate thing you can do to a cat. So I'm hoping he'll be able to, read minds or walk through walls or something when he comes back.
Like does he like glow in the dark now or something? Like that's so many fun imaginative possibilities.
I hope so, given how much I paid for it. Like, I want some extras.
Yeah, get a little superpower for your cat. That's moving forward. That is a distinction that you and I diverge on, because I live purely alone. You technically have a living, breathing creature normally in your house, and I do not. What is that like for you?
Yeah.
Because I also have animal trauma. I don't know if you have animal pet trauma in your life, but I have pet trauma in my life that I feel like prohibits me from ever loving an animal again. How do you feel?
Oh my
How do you feel
gosh.
about the mortality of
Yeah.
your cat?
Having read your book, I can understand that. But
Mm,
yeah, uh, I, partly because he's called Hargreaves. When I got Hargreaves, he was a stray. He was a rescue, so I have no idea how old he is, which means as soon as I got him, it's like he could be on death's door instantly. So his mortality has hung over me a lot, and I know it will destroy me. But I just can't imagine not having a cat here. Like particularly during the pandemic lockdowns, it was so helpful to have
yeah.
another oh, have another living being here. And yeah, I mean, how many cats did we have growing up? Three different cats, and each time they died, it did, ruin me. And it's sort of built-in trauma, isn't it? But I've decided that the payoff of having a cat is worth the sort of month of terrible grief
Mm.
that I will experience. Hopefully not yet. I would like to get some more years out of him now now I've spent so much on him. But yeah, and maybe he'll outlive me, fingers crossed. But yeah, I would you ever get are you no to pets forever now?
I don't want to be so locked off and say that I will never get a dog or a cat or anything, but I think I use the excuse that I like to travel too much as a reason to not do it, because there is absolutely the main reason, which is I just can't bear the thought of losing one. Like for anyone, Simon referenced my book. Like I write about my first dog that was my best friend, and she died in a very traumatic way when I was a kid. And so yeah, the thought of like losing something that I love like that again, because it's like definitive, unless I die in a freak accident, like I'm going to see the death of my pet, and I just can't sign up for that. Like there's nothing in me that's prompting me to go visit a shelter or a rescue place and get an animal as soon as this podcast ends. Like there's nothing in me that wants that. But there is a practical limitation of just like, yeah, I do love to travel a lot. I love to move around. I love to visit people. I love to take long road trips. And it's not to say that I couldn't find, faithful people to take care of my animals while I'm away, or take them with me even if I'm able to do that. Like there's probably a ton of workarounds for that, but it also just feels like a practical, like I'm just not in a responsible enough state at the moment to be able to tend to an animal in addition to the trauma of that. But I think it speaks to the bigger picture of like, do I also have the same approach with humans? Because I think there are also times where I've lost a lot of good friendships. And does that mean I can't be good friends with anybody anymore, or I can't love another human because they might leave? So it really does like usher in a slew of existential questions about who do you love or who do you give your heart to? Because I think C.S. Lewis has that quote about that. Like if you can't even give your heart to an animal or lock yourself off to love from other people, like what kind of person are you at that point? So as it stands now, living alone, the only living entities in my apartment are my many plants. I've become a plant daddy, so I have lots of plants to keep alive. So that's at least something in my house.
I did think about doing that myself a while ago, and I was in a garden centre Googling all the plants, and everything is poisonous to cats. So,
so there you go.
I bought a fern. Yeah, I got a fern, which he instantly ate. So thankfully it wasn't poisonous, but I was right to be cautious. So.
Wow, got to be mindful of those things. So you mentioned just like having your own space and having your own way of doing things, a place in the country. Any other things that come to mind as far as joys or things that make you happy to live by yourself as opposed to with other humans?
Yeah, I really love being by myself, which, it sounds quite simple, but I remember in my last house, when I'd walk home from work, I'd just be like really hoping nobody would be in when I put the key in the door, even though I liked all my housemates. And I was just like, I really wanted to be on my own. So I just don't seem to get lonely, which is a real blessing, but like there's no amount of time on my own that seems like too much, except maybe like a pandemic lockdown. That pushed the boundary. But yeah, it's something I just really appreciate about that. And I think maybe particularly in a village where people are friendly and know each other, and I can say hello to lots of people as I walk around, so I don't feel completely isolated. But there is just something about no one's going to nag me if I haven't done the washing up, or if, if I'm late for work, I don't have to queue for the bathroom. I can't remember which guest you had who talked about being angry about his roommate's ottoman. I was like, I'm never going to be in that situation. I'm never going to worry about
that was good old Daniel talking about the pots and pans, where he hid his pots and pans from his roommates. Yeah.
Oh no, I was thinking about the guy who was upset that someone put furniture in the living room.
Oh,
he didn't like.
Andrew.
Was that
Yeah,
the same guy?
Andrew had a guy with an ottoman, in the living room. Shout out to those guys. The challenge of living with straight men. There you go.
So yeah, I don't have to worry about any of those things. I can have people to come stay. So it's only a 1-bedroom flat, but I've got a sofa bed. So, people can come and stay.
Nice.
And yeah, I did think, will I get lonely? And I think, again, having a cat has helped that not happen. But generally, I thrive in this scenario in a way that I did not entirely realize that I would. So that's been
amazing.
a real blessing.
Yeah. Good for you for being wired in such a way. Because I will say, and this will segue into what are the challenges of living alone, because this was the one for me. Like when I first moved out 6 years ago and got my own little studio, context is a little bit important, because the fallout of that was that it was an intentional living situation, an intentional community that fell apart and failed. And so there was the aftermath of just a lot of grief and a lot of, honestly, trauma of trying to create this place where a bunch of men could live together. And when that didn't work, I had to move out and I had to get my own place, and I was living alone for the first time pretty much ever. And so there were just a lot of hard nights, like literal nights, where I just was lying there in my bed and just was so tangibly alone. And it was just so difficult because I'd had so many situations throughout. I mean, I'm so blessed, so many situations throughout my adulthood years, 20s and early 30s, where I had some really great living situations and great roommates. And so to suddenly be on my own, there was a sense of like refreshment and revitalization. Like, this is my space now and I can make of it what I will. Like, there was some like aesthetic enjoyment to it, just as far as having my own place and getting my own furniture eventually, and getting my own, like, I had never gotten furniture in my whole life until I started living alone, like 5 years ago, probably. So there's a lot of stuff about making a space my own that I really enjoyed, but as far as the limitation and the challenge, like just feeling the loneliness on a level that I had never felt before, was very difficult. And I remember a friend reaching out to me during that season, because I was sharing a little bit about that with him. And he was just like, Tom, like, you have to learn to be alone. And it sounds like such a childish, simplistic thing. Like, what do you mean I have to learn to be alone, or learn to like myself, or learn to live by myself? It was a life skill that I had never like developed and had to hone and had to figure out as an early 30 something. And it's something I'm still figuring out. It's not like I figured it out after a year or 2 years or 5 years. Like, I'm still figuring that out. But I will say year by year, it's gotten easier to live by myself. There's still lonely nights. Like, I based on your description of where you live and how you live, maybe it helps that you have a cat as well. So maybe that adds to your experience. But there are definitely times where I do come home and wish the light were on, and wish somebody were home, or wish there was like a TV show on that I could watch in the middle of with somebody or a group of somebody's. And instead it's just like a dark place. And so that sometimes I still feel that lingering sense that I wish there were other people around. But I would say year by year, I'm getting like, it feels better and better to have my own space, to have like enough room to have guests come over. Like, that's definitely a plus. Like, if I'm going to live alone, hopefully for however long I live alone, I always want there to be space for people. So that's something that I think it's just good to have that, to be able to practice hospitality and to have that sense of welcoming other people in. But I would say that's definitely my biggest challenges. I think the challenge is wondering, is there a configuration out there that I'm not tapping into? Is there some one person, 2 people, 5 people, Marshall's farm of 20 people? Like, is there some configuration where I would be holistically a healthier person than where I am now? And I think that's where I start to let my brain run wild and let the imagination run wild. Do you ever wonder that? Do you ever wonder if there's a configuration out there that would be better, not only for you, but for people around you? Or do you feel like, no, you're good. You've got your place, you've got your cat, you've got your books, you are ready to roll?
The only exception is that I would love to live with my twin brother,
Hmm.
and he has made clear that he does not want that. Like
Interesting. Okay.
we're very we're very close. He loves me. It's fine, but he's just like, I don't want to live with you. It also doesn't help that he very much wants to live in suburbs, and he likes living on the outskirts of a city, and I definitely want to always live in small villages now. So there's not even a place that we would both happily live. So it's not going to happen, I imagine. My sort of dream is that maybe it'll happen when we're like in our 80s or something. We'll just like go to a retirement home together.
Oh, that would be so cute. Are there any other like limitations or challenges, like anything that gives you a sense of dissonance or something isn't completely safe or completely correct about where I live or how I live my life right now?
Well, yeah, the thing I find really hard actually is I'm quite an anxious person, or I get anxious, I get into sort of anxiety spirals about things. And so there's been a few times where like water has come through the roof, or like when Hargreaves was getting ill, or all these things where there's like a problem coming up, and it would be so nice to have somebody else who's like, this is their problem too. We can talk about how to solve it. They can make me feel less anxious, or I can make them feel less anxious. They can phone a plumber, whatever it is. And whereas if it's just me and I'm like, oh, the water's dripping, I'm getting more and more worried about that. I don't know if I need to call someone now, or if I need to call someone in the morning. So in those situations, those are the only times where I'm like, I really wish I lived alone. Oh, the only other time actually is I'm quite arachnophobic. I did have arachnophobia therapy a couple of years ago.
No
so
way.
I'm doing better now. But particularly before I did arachnophobia therapy, if there was a spider in the house, that was the time when I was like, I really wish somebody else lived here.
Wow. I am. Do you mind if I pry you on that? What is arachnophobia therapy? How do you get over arachnophobia or work through it?
Yeah, so the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is that the right word? Initials? Anyway, you make a exposure hierarchy. So I made basically things I wanted to do that I couldn't currently do, from the easiest thing through to the hardest thing that I wanted to do. So at that point, I couldn't say the word spider. So my first on my list was saying the word spider out loud. And top of my list was watching a video of a tarantula, because I thought, I don't need to ever see one in the wild. We don't have them in this country, but but I would like, if they like pop up in a movie or whatever, I'd like to be able to cope with that. And you do each step until you feel maybe not completely comfortable with it, but like they say, till you're half as afraid, and then you repeat the step and then you go on to the next one. So I basically worked my way up, and some of them came really quickly, like saying the word spider. That was like quite quickly, like, oh yeah, I can do that. Each time you sort of stay in the moment, because if your body thinks you need to get away every time you're doing something scary, you're sort of teaching yourself to be afraid. Whereas if you stay there being like, I am scared, but I'm going to stay here for another couple seconds, then your body's like, okay, we don't need to panic. So yeah, like looking at a picture of a spider, that was quite a big jump up. Colin, I shouldn't say I can say his name. Colin, my brother.
Shout out to Colin.
Really helpful. Hey, Carl. Was really helpful in like finding pictures of spiders for me, because I didn't want to just Google like spider, because that'd be terrifying. Yeah. I had to at one point go and get a plastic spider, so I was going like around toy shops in my nearest town, looking incredibly unwilling as I was asking shop assistants if they had any spiders for sale, and clearly not wanting to hold what they found. So so I'm still arachnophobic, but I can manage it now, and I can say spider, for example.
That has nothing to do with our conversation today. That is so fascinating to me. I just like, that is different. That's really fascinating. So are you not booking a trip to Australia anytime soon? They have like all of the worst insects and everything that can kill you. It's insane.
And in fact, I promise this is not just like a cat propaganda podcast, but having a cat really helped with arachnophobia, because he keeps them at bay.
Oh,
He's always just eating them.
Yeah. He'll keep all the creepy crawlies away from you. That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. That was a nice little tangent. I love that. You mentioned way at the top, like how you grew up. So, cause you mentioned you have a twin brother. So what was your context for home growing up? Like in a few sentences, like what was your family life like? What was your living situation as a child? How did you respond to the home that you lived in?
I grew up in a vicarage, so vicar's son, pastor's kid. So I grew up
PK,
or like
a VK.
We don't have here, but yes. The first time someone called me PK, I was in the Philippines actually, and someone just started chanting it at me, and I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
That's so
but yes, vicar's kid, minister's kid, whatever you want to call it. Lived in a quite sort of rough urban area until I was 6, and then we moved to a small village and grew up there. and my mum didn't, well, she's sort of part-time teaching, but was mostly at home. And yeah, I think the main legacy I have of growing up in a vicarage is, I think that's one of the reasons I value my privacy so much now, because a vicarage, like any minister's house, is basically sort of half private, half public. There's always meetings happening in the living room, or people could turn up at any time, or we always people phoning. And upstairs was like, that was ours. Downstairs was sort of public, and so it's given me a very like structured sense of where lines of privacy are, and wanting to protect my private space. I think that's, yeah. I mean, growing up in a vicarage had many blessings, and I'm very grateful for growing up in the church. But yeah, I didn't love the fact that people might just turn up at our house at any point, and it wasn't. They were sort of entitled to come in.
No, that's a fascinating upbringing that you had compared to other people that grew up outside of the church. Very fascinating. And then just real quick, like, again, because you've mentioned your twin brother several times now, this podcast and the last one, I think. Just what was that growing up? Was that just normal for you? Did you know that was different from the usual human experience? Like, I'm curious, just growing up with a twin, what that was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, people do often ask what it's like growing up with a twin. It's really hard for me to know what it's like not growing up with a twin. I find the idea of having a sibling who is not your age just really weird. Like the fact that your sibling was doing, exams at a different time from you, or leaving home at a different time from you, seems wild to me. So yeah, I loved it. I'm so grateful I'm a twin. At that point, we thought we were non-identical. We didn't know we were identical until we did a DNA test just for our 30th birthday.
Wow.
So some of those like identical twin complexes maybe weren't there. I don't know, but we were always really close. We like always squabbled. We still squabble now, but we're always bickering. But we would, very much reliant on each other. And I found it very hard leaving home for that reason. I missed him an awful lot at university. And I also found the idea of just being me quite weird, because I'd always come in a pair and people always knew him. And it felt quite odd to be known without the context that I thought was most important to who I was. And the fact that he had friends who didn't know who I was, I found that really weird. It was weird, particularly on our birthday, like my first birthday, when it was just me that people were singing at. I was like, I don't like this. He should be here as well.
It's like you're a package deal. Yeah. How far away does he live now from where you are?
He's only an hour and a quarter from me, so it's not far.
So you still get to see him fairly regularly then?
Yeah, we see each other. And in fact, the best friend I mentioned who I lived with also lives in the same city as him. So often I'm go visit them both. So I'm taking that way.
I also have to remind myself that you're in the UK and not America, where here in America, you could conceivably be thousands of miles, even thousands more kilometers away from a person, versus in the UK, like you could probably be far away, but it's not going to be to the extent that you can get as far away here in America.
Yeah, and he could have left the country, I guess, but neither of us are particularly adventurous to the point of emigrating anywhere.
Gotcha. Well, that's really fascinating. Yeah, I hope there are other twins out there listening, because I'm so fascinated. I keep trying to manifest this, that I want twins. I want some twins to join YOB where they're both queer or gay or SSA or bi or something. Like I would be so tickled if that ever happened, that we had two men in our community who look the same. They're different. They're different names, different stories. I would find that so fascinating. We've never had that. So maybe.
Sorry that Colin disappoints on that front. But,
yeah, no worries.
I did my best.
You did your best. So as we wind down the conversation, Simon, this phrase "at home," I'm curious where that lands with you in those three arenas that we tackle here in YOB: faith, sexuality, and masculinity. And you can start wherever you want. Choose your own adventure with either of those, but where do you feel or not feel as much as you would like to feel at home in any of those three ways?
Yeah, I've been thinking quite a lot about being at home and masculinity, so I'd like to start.
Let's start there. Everyone else has always started with faith or sexuality. I think you're the first person to start with masculinity. Let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, it links to what we were saying at the top of the episode about the retreat was my first time going away with men, and I mentioned in passing, I think, on the previous episode that class and masculinity are really interwoven in the UK, possibly in other places too. But because I've never been very masculine, and that has never bothered me. I've never really seen that as something to attain to, and because I'm middle class and have a posh voice, that doesn't matter really. Like most of the people I know who are similar class and similar background to me are not very masculine. In this country, masculinity is much more closely tied to working class, I guess. And I think if you're effeminate in the working class, that's much harder to deal with and much more likely to come against obstacles. Like my dad is not a very masculine man in many ways. He's a very gentle person. So I didn't have this sort of, I can't think of like, sort of very uber masculine, like laborer person to live up to or something. I just had this quite sweet, softly spoken man as my father. So I didn't really, I was never that troubled by not being masculine, largely because I don't think femininity is a negative trait. So I'm like, yeah, I'm happy to be a mix of the two, leaning more towards feminine. But at the same time, I'm realizing more and more that I don't feel at home or comfortable in groups of men, particularly.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I guess I'd like to be better at or feel more comfortable around. I loved on the retreat that I guess because we were all side B men, I did feel completely at home there. I felt like the fact that we were side B sort of overtook the fact that we were all men. But I've never had that many male friends. I've got a handful of good male friends and then various who are, acquaintances. But my best friends have always been women. I've just felt more comfortable and more at home in those friendships. And that's something I was always fine with. But now in recent years, I've been like thinking I shouldn't write off half the human race as people I am less likely to forge connection with. Yeah.
I'm glad you verbalized that because I think I have no scientific data to back this up, but I think the vast majority of the men like in our YOBBERS community, or certainly the ones that come on our retreats, or get involved in the Zoom calls that we do, like I would say more often than not, like they prefer groups of men versus groups of women. But I also know there's a good number of people, men in our community, who have just gravitated more toward women and developing those strong friendships with women. And so that is not a completely uncommon story. And even myself, like I remember those high school years and early college where I never, like there were some passing male acquaintances that were around, but as far as like people that I would actually have legitimate conversations and do things with, like there were always women. It was always women from high school to early college years. And it's only really been since starting YOB, like that's when the shift has come to like men everywhere. And now, I kind of had this awakening like several years ago to be like, oh my gosh, I have too many men in my life. Like I have too many men. And like, what happened to all the women that I used to like confide in and have really close friendships with? Like, they're just no longer, if they're in my life, they're like all of a sudden on the far outer circle. Like I talk to them every once in a while now, or have these passing interactions with them, but they're nowhere near what they were when I was just so starved for friendship, certainly with other men. And so I think I've been on this journey to kind of these last few years of like bringing some sort of equalizer to like connecting with women as well. And I know the coming Your Other Sisters, like that's going to be a big catalyst and already has been a big catalyst as far as connecting with women in meaningful, intentional ways. But even outside that, people at church or any other outlet for connection, like that's something that is more on my mind as far as like connecting with other women again, because I have a bounty of men. It's like a good problem to have that I have too many men in my life, both inside YOB and out. But getting some solid women in my life again, I think is going to be a big part of my growth. Because I think, like you hinted at, like I think masculinity isn't bad, femininity isn't bad. Like I think we all need both. I think we all need a healthy amount of both in our lives, and to surround ourselves with people that encapsulate those qualities. And so that's something that I'm going to do. I really thought about a parallel to your arachnophobia therapy. It almost was like you putting yourself, exposure therapy, like exposing yourself
to men.
For lack of a better phrase.
To men isn't the best way of phrasing it.
Yeah, I was going to say, as it was coming out of my mouth, I was like, this probably doesn't sound the best, but hopefully the listeners get what I'm saying. But no, you put yourself in a situation that you normally have not, and you came out of the other side. So theoretically, you could do that again with less trepidation the next time, even though, like you said, there wasn't much there to begin with, because you all have a common sexuality theology to kind of start from. But who knows? Maybe your next endeavor, Simon, is a group of straight men that you go on a retreat with.
Maybe. Well, yeah. I did enjoy in one of your episodes, you referred to how masculine it was to drive a manual car or drive stick. And I was thinking,
Yeah.
everyone in the UK is very masculine because we,
Oh, there you
we all
go.
drive
There you
manual
go.
cars.
That
So,
is not as
built in the
common
blood.
over here. Yeah. Some do, but as that's not a skill I've ever learned.
I
So
felt a pat on my back when I heard that. It's like, gosh, yeah, very manly.
you're more masculine than me in that context, for sure.
Something have found interesting to navigate with mostly female friends is when they get married. Like, what is my relationship like with my best friend's husband?
Oh, yeah.
Some of whom definitely know that I'm gay. Some of whom maybe I don't know if they do, because like I'm not a rival, but also you're coming along and taking up a lot more of the time that they used to be able to spend with me.
Mm.
I'm another man. It's a weird dynamic, and thankfully, my closest friends are all married men whom I really love, and want to spend time with them. They become my friends too. But it is a strange initial dynamic when they start dating, and I'm like, I'm here, but I'm not a threat,
Yeah.
but I'm also an important person in their life. So yeah.
Yeah, I've never had that happen. A female friend, like a really good female friend, close female friend, get married. I've never had that experience. So I'm curious how that would impact my own relationships there. I mean, male friends too, to another degree, but that's an interesting thought to think about. What about faith and sexuality? Where do you feel at home in those two arenas?
Yeah, maybe there's a less complex in my head. I think I feel quite at home in both of them. My faith is also my job now, I guess. I work for a Christian charity, so it's really permeates throughout my life. I love my church. I've been there for 18 years. I feel very confident in my faith in a way that I've had, a couple ups and downs in the past, but I'm on secure, rocky ground at the moment, rocky in the good sense. And yeah, I guess I feel very at home in my church. I feel very loved, and a lot of people there know I'm gay, so I feel increasingly accepted there for the whole of me rather than just the part I was initially showing them. And then sexuality, yeah, I think particularly since I found Yob and found other Side B friends, feel very at home there as well, or at homo, if you will. Has anyone made that joke yet?
No. Wow. It took us most of this series to get there, but I'm glad we got there. So good on you, Simon. At homo. With any luck, that phrase will stick. Sometimes there's a phrase or a word or an inside joke that comes in our community. Maybe that'll stick. That would be delightful if that stuck.
I'd like that to be my legacy.
At homo. Yeah. Well, that's great. I'm glad, because I'm in such an American little bubble, and I'm doing my best to burst the bubble, and I'm trying to escape this country. Like I'm trying to, over the next few years, because I think a big part of me, and this ties into my story as far as feeling at home, like a big part of my journey is just like, I don't want to ever feel, the phrase complacent has come up a lot. Like the differentiation between feeling comfortable where I am versus feeling complacent where I am, because I think it's all too easy. And I grew up in this culture in a Christian school. Like none of these people are ever going to leave like a 20-mile radius of where they grew up and where they lived. And there's part of me that feels happy for them that they have like a sense of home and this little bubble life that they've created. But then part of me is just like, you are not even coming close to seeing what life is like outside of your zip code, outside of your state, outside of this country, certainly. And there's part of me that wants to experience that and wants to experience life in other cultures and see what that's like, to live through a European's eyes, or to live through an African's eyes, or to live through an Australian's eyes who have to deal with gigantic spiders in their houses on a daily basis. But I say all that to say, it's like, it's been really great to like get to connect a little bit with you and Daniel and some of our other UK yobbers, and just like hear a little bit, catch a little bit of what you guys experience as far as living as a side B person over there, living in a different country compared to ours, and to hear stories of conferences or retreats now and other get-togethers, and just to be grateful that you guys have that support over there. And certainly wanting to visit at some point, like that is on my trajectory to come visit at some point soon. But then also to like, to keep bursting more bubbles. Like, okay, once I visit the UK and get to see your guys' lives firsthand, like where else can I go to connect with people who are maybe not as fortunate? Like if there's somebody that lives alone in a certain country, and they don't know other people, there's probably somebody listening right now that they don't know a single person where they live. I mean, it could be like that in America for all I know, but certainly in other countries, like they just don't know anybody else that's remotely close to their experience with faith and with sexuality. And so that's my heart, is that hopefully, just from my own personal perspective, that I can be able to experience life in other contexts and never feel complacent and in where I am, but then also to, I don't know, hopefully see our community grow so that it can extend to other places near and far. And we'll see where that leads, because I'm just so glad we were able to bring in at least somebody from the UK onto this series, and just to get a different perspective outside of our American bubble. And who knows, maybe in the years to come, we'll have people chiming in from even other countries. That's my hope.
Yeah, and really hope we can get you on a UK retreat sometime. I was looking around that thinking what a special time this is, and I'm so grateful to Tom that you've made that possible. I know that it was just one small part of what you've created, but
yeah,
it really meant a lot. So thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, thanks. It's cool to hear. I'm glad it came together. Shout out to Daniel as well, because I know that was his baby to make this retreat come together. So shout out to Daniel for making it happen, and all the other people who pitched in and made it happen. I'm glad to hear about it. I hope YOB can make more homes for people as we continue to grow, as we continue to extend our reach. That's the goal. Creating homes, creating little nests, little sparrow nests around this world. Yeah. Well, anything else you wanted to say, Simon, before we close this episode on living alone? Any other things come to mind?
I've got nothing except just the frown thing was the main thing I wanted to get across. I'm glad I got frown in.
Glad we got that. The furrowed brow. It means something else over there. That's good to know. Yeah. Well, I'm curious if there's anyone out there who lives alone. What are the highs? What are the lows? What are the things you love? The things that you wish were better about your situation? Tell us a story. Go over to our podcast episode page, yourotherbrothers.com/podcast. Find this episode with Simon about living alone and tell us your experience, because I'm curious. I'm curious to see. I guess as a little bonus question, as we already ended it, but we're still going, Simon. Do you ever worry someday about like having a heart attack or having some like dramatic situation and there's nobody there to tend to you? Does that keep you up at night?
And you always end these podcasts on such a positive note, and mine's like, do you worry that your body will never be found?
Yeah, that's the thing with living alone. Like, what do you do? If someone else is there, they can help, but what do you do if it's just you?
Yeah. I mean, I do. I mean, I don't want to end this on a complete downer, but I do worry about, falling and no one finding me in decades to come, or everyone I love dying before me and me not knowing what to do. But whichever cat I've got at that particular stage in my life will doubtless sound the alarm and go to my rescue. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to think of a way to make this end a little stronger. So bleak.
I know, so bleak. I just know there are people out there thinking it like, well, what happens? Yeah, what happens if you fire? This is my answer to that question. My answer to that question is like, I don't know what's going to happen when I'm 70 years old or 90 years old. Like whether I'm going to be living alone or whether I'm going to have some situation where someone's checking in on me or whatever. Like I have no idea. Like to think so specifically about what my life is going to look like when I might have a heart attack or something, like that's just getting too into catastrophic thinking that is not relevant to my present day situation. So I don't know, that's my encouragement to anyone out there thinking about that. Like, what are you going to do if you're still trying to walk this road to faithfully follow Jesus with your sexuality? And that means you're living a single celibate life. Like, you don't know what your living situation is going to be in 30 years, 50 years, 10 years, however old you are. Like, I just feel like we got to live in the present. We got to make the most of where we are today and let tomorrow worry about itself. So that's my approach to that. Maybe that's lazy. Maybe there's some level of intentionality as far as setting ourselves up in the future, but I don't know. Live present. That's my suggestion.
And if you're listening to this and you know me and I've not spoken to you in a week, just give me a phone call to check I'm still alive.
Yeah, I'll check on Simon. Yeah, exactly. Simon, this was lovely. It's always great to talk to you. I can't wait to have you back. I've already decided that I'm going to reach out to you every few months to bring you back on this show. Yeah, I just love the perspective, your humor, everything about you. your amazing book wall that sadly our listeners can't see, but you have this amazing wall of books behind you, which may or may not be real. Some of them are real and some of them are not. So it's fun.
Yeah. It was always a guessing game. Thanks so much for having me back. I really loved it. I'll come back anytime.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, y'all stay tuned for our series finale next time. We've got one final episode this summer before we take a little break because we have our own retreat to plan. So we got an American retreat coming down the pike. But we got one more episode in this at-home series that I've just greatly enjoyed, getting this little snapshot of how all the different members of our community are living their lives with our faith, with our sexuality, with our masculinity. It's been a joy to hear from everybody in this series so far. So looking forward to tying the final bow on it next week. Thanks again, Simon, for helping me tie this bow on our solitary existences.
Thank you.
See, we live alone, but we're still connected. We still meet people. We're not just like total hermits, right?
Absolutely.
Like you seem very socially adept. Hopefully I do as well.
Yeah. Yes, we're both very in demand. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So hopefully we were able to dispel any myths out there about what living alone can do to you or what it makes you, the stereotype of of an old cat lady or a hermit man or something. Yeah. Or a combination
I'm not
of
sure
the
I've
two.
dispelled any of the cat lady things with my radioactive cat. But yeah.
Yes. Living alone. It can be a beautiful, beautiful thing. Always challenges to any situation, but I think it can be a beautiful thing. So anyway, great to celebrate with you and can't wait to close out this series next time, y'all. So until we gather at home once more.
When I'm with you, I feel like I'm already home.
I'm glad no one else did at homo because I've been thinking of the whole series. And it's
That's so
like,
funny.
no,
Yeah, I it's such an obvious joke, but I'm surprised. Yeah, that it's never come up. So that's hilarious.
Everyone else is self-censored.
Okay, so we are now in the car going to the Airbnb, and there has been so much traffic, but Simon is our driver.
Hi. Hello. Oh, good grief. Hello. I am driving a bit, very, very slowly.
So narrate our experience. He also just pushed the brake too hard.
I don't understand automatic handbrakes. I don't know what's going on.
Much to my
But
amusement.
we're bonding. We're close. We're maybe too close in terms of how hot it is in this car.
There is a nice little manor in front of us. How would you describe it?
Like a farmhouse? I would definitely describe that as a farmhouse.
Yeah, I can see a barn.
Oh. So Scottish barns are really fancy. I just learned.
And we've got Oakwood Caravan Park to our right.
I mean, you could Google that and find out exactly where we are right now. That's Oakwood Caravan and Camping Park.
So we're going to, I don't know how to say it, Cairngorms National Park. How do you say it?
Cairngorms.
How do you say it?
I say Cairngorms, but I'm not Scottish.
But that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, there we go.
This is good content. This is quality. This is what people are tuning in for, I think.
Absolutely.
But all 7 of us have arrived in Scotland. One of us started in Scotland, but we're excited. We're nervous. We're tired.
Hungry.
Just
a bit hungry.
Yeah, definitely hungry.
Hungry for Jesus.
Amen. And food, actually. But
For Chinese takeaway, apparently that's a very big thing here in Scotland.
if you want to know one thing about Scotland, it's Chinese food. Yeah.
It's okay if you're not doing How do you say Cairngorms in Scottish?
What?
I take Cairngorms. It's the same. No, Cairngorms.
Leave him alone.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to leave you alone.
Like, yeah, we were correct, of course. Having been born here.
Oh, that is a nice little mountain with fog thing.